Hello there, and welcome to the Sleepless Scientist, a quiet place in the wider cosmos where your thoughts can gently loosen and knowledge arrives like a soft lullaby settling over a calm evening. Tonight, we'll begin a journey into the nature of reality itself, a question that has followed humanity for thousands of years. But before you settle in, I'd love it if you could take a moment to like this video and subscribe, only if these gentle explorations truly bring you comfort. And when you're ready, feel free to leave a comment letting me know where in the world you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. It's always a quiet joy to see all the different little corners of Earth coming together here, each one holding its own slice of time. Now, if you'd like, you can dim the lights, perhaps let a small fan hum in the background, and ease into a comfortable place. Let your mind drift if it wishes to. We'll still be here, unfolding the story softly. There is a moment just before sleep when the world seems to blur at the edges. Shapes turn gentler, sounds grow rounder, and even your thoughts lose their sharp corners. That moment where waking meets resting is a fitting doorway into our topic. Because reality, the thing we wake into each morning and fall out of each night, may not be as rigid or as solid as it first appears. It stretches, bends, flickers, and sometimes hides behind the simple familiarity of daily life. And so this first step is just a small, warm window, a place where we can peer out gently, without rushing, and ask a question that children ask naturally but adults often forget to revisit. What is real, truly real? You might imagine that reality is simply what is out there, independent of us. The weight of a mug in your hands, the soft glow of a lamp, the cool floor beneath bare feet. And in many ways it is. But even these simple sensations are quietly shaped by a deeper process. When you hold that mug, your fingers don't touch the object itself. Instead, nerves send tiny pulses toward the brain, and the brain arranges those pulses into the feeling of warmth and solidity. In other words, even the most familiar experiences are more like invitations the world offers, and your mind completes the painting. Across the animal kingdom, the picture shifts. Bees do not see our warm yellows and reds. Their world blooms in ultraviolet, glowing with patterns hidden from us. A bat hears walls and insects as shapes in sound. A snake senses warmth instead of colour. Each creature inhabits a different version of the same place, a slightly altered melody played by reality. It's almost as if the universe hands every species its own set of tuning forks and says, "Here, this is the song you were built to hear." Humans too live inside a crafted melody, one shaped by our biology, our history, our emotions, and the stories we tell ourselves. Neuroscientists often describe perception as a kind of prediction, a gentle forecasting where the mind guesses what is happening and checks just enough to stay accurate. You can imagine your brain as an artist who draws the world first from memory and then lightly erases and redraws whenever the senses disagree. Most of the time, the guess matches the world so well that we never notice the quiet dance beneath our awareness. But sometimes, especially in the soft edges of sleepless nights or the drifting space before dreams, we catch a glimpse of that dance and realize that the world we experience is not simply given. It's created in partnership. This doesn't make the world unreal. If anything, it makes it more astonishing. It suggests that reality has depth, a surface we see and a hidden architecture that supports it. The surface is familiar, the warmth of tea, the sound of a soft rain. The deeper layers are more mysterious, thoughts arising before you decide them, sensations appearing without your command, colours existing only when your mind interprets certain frequencies of light. These layers do not contradict each other. They build upon each other like the delicate folds of a paper lantern glowing from within, and in that lantern, light and shadow mingle. childhood memories, old questions, anxieties that soften with breath. All of them shape how the world feels. Two people sitting in the same room can live in entirely different realities. For one, the room is lonely. For the other, it's peaceful. The room hasn't changed. The lighting hasn't changed. Yet the experience, the reality, shifts because of what the mind brings into it. This is not illusion. This is the genuine texture of lived experience. Reality is as much about presence as it is about objects. Even physics, the science most often associated with rigid certainty, quietly acknowledges that what seems solid is mostly empty space, with particles flickering in patterns of probability. But here, instead of mentioning symbols or equations, we can picture it as a vast cosmic loom weaving possibilities into moments, threads of maybe becoming threads of now. It is a gentle reminder that the world is dynamic, not a fixed photograph, but a continuous drawing that never quite finishes itself. As we sit here at the beginning of this long, slow exploration, it might help to shift the question slightly. Instead of asking what is reality, we can ask, how does reality meet us? The two are different. The first assumes that reality is a single object waiting to be defined. The second suggests a relationship, an interaction that changes as we change. Almost like a quiet companion walking beside us in the night, matching our pace, waiting for us to notice its less obvious shapes. Perhaps reality is the physical world. Perhaps it's a construct woven by mind. Perhaps it's something deeper, a field of awareness that gives rise to both. We don't need to decide yet. Tonight, we're simply opening the window, letting in the cool air of curiosity, and observing how even the simplest experiences carry a hint of mystery. Nothing needs to be resolved quickly. Just let the questions sit with you, like soft coals glowing in a quiet hearth. As we wander onward, we'll look at how perception sculpts the world, how physics reshapes our assumptions, how ancient philosophy and modern thought unexpectedly agree, and how consciousness might be more than a witness, perhaps even the stage where everything unfolds. For now, rest in the thought that reality is richer than it seems, and that this moment, this one, right here, is a small, warm window, opening gently into everything else. There is a certain gentleness in realizing that the world you experience is not simply delivered to you as a finished picture, but is shaped, moment by moment, by the mind itself. You can imagine your senses as small messengers bringing scattered pieces of information to a quiet room, and in that room your brain gathers those pieces, reorganizes them, fills the gaps, and finally hands you something that feels whole. The result arrives so quickly and so smoothly that you rarely notice the trillions of delicate steps beneath it. But once you begin to pay attention, you might feel a soft sense of wonder, as though you've discovered a hidden artist living behind your eyes. If you hold your hand up in front of you right now, what you see is not the hand itself but the interpretation of it, a pattern of light converted into electrical signals and translated into shape, colour and depth. The hand you feel is not the raw matter of skin but the mind's reconstruction of pressure, temperature and motion. All of this unfolds quietly, like a team of caretakers sweeping through a room each night while everyone sleeps, making sure everything feels familiar the next morning. We tend to think the world flows directly into us, but it is more accurate to say that our minds reach outward and gently predict what is happening before the senses even report back. This idea might seem abstract at first, so it can help to picture a painter working from memory. She starts with broad strokes before looking closely. She guesses the shape of an object, the thickness of its shadow, the softness of its edges. Only later does she refine the details. Your brain works in much the same way. Long before you consciously see something, your mind has already created a draft of it, based on past experience, expectations, and countless quiet assumptions. When new sensory data comes in, the mind does not begin from scratch. Instead, it adjusts the draft, like a painter gently correcting the tilt of a vase or the brightness of a flame. This is what many neuroscientists describe, in simple language, as a prediction-first system. It isn't that the world is imagined or unreal. It's that the mind prefers to stay a few steps ahead, smoothing out uncertainty, stitching together the gaps, and giving us a sense of continuity. Without this constant forecasting, the world would flicker and jolt in ways too chaotic to navigate. Instead, it flows like a river at dusk, sometimes clear, sometimes hazy, but always moving in a direction that feels consistent and familiar. You can see this predictive storytelling in the small illusions of everyday life. Think of the moment when you mishear a word because you expected a different one. Or when you feel your phone buzz in your pocket only to realise it never did. Or when you walk into a room and swear you see someone standing there before recognising it as a coat on a chair. The mind is always trying to make sense of things quickly, smoothing the world into something that feels inhabited and understandable. At times it guesses beautifully, at other times its speed gets ahead of accuracy. But the intention is always the same, to create a world that makes sense to you. Different animals moving through the same physical space live inside different worlds created by their own predictive systems. A dragonfly can see movements so rapid that they would blur into nothing for us. A dog detects scents like tiny messages carried on the wind, each one full of details we can't begin to access. The same meadow at sunrise is a mosaic of fragrances for one creature, a tapestry of ultraviolet patterns for another, and a gentle slope of colours and shadows for us. None of these worlds are wrong. Each is a valid interpretation built from the tools that species has been given. Humans, too, have variations in the realities they inhabit. One person may perceive a crowded street as energizing, while another feels overwhelmed. One may view a thunderstorm as peaceful, another as ominous. These differences come from the inner conditions each mind carries, memories, fears, hopes, and the subtle stories we tell ourselves without noticing. A child might see a dark hallway as full of possibility, while an adult shaped by years of caution might see only shadows. The hallway is the same, the worlds are not. These inner worlds often reveal themselves most clearly in moments of emotion. A warm conversation can make an ordinary room feel brighter. A lingering worry can make the same room feel smaller. The mind adjusts the lighting of experience much like a dimmer switch on a wall, raising the brightness, softening the contrast, adding colours the eyes never directly saw. No formula or equation is needed to describe this shift. It is enough to say that emotion bends perception, the way a warm breeze bends the shape of a candle flame. In the quiet space before sleep, when thoughts lose their strict edges and the mind drifts, these processes become easier to sense. You may notice how a faint sound becomes a story, or how the shape of a shadow becomes a figure, or how a memory blends with the present moment. The brain is easing its grip on precise prediction, allowing imagination to fill more of the canvas. It can feel disorienting or comforting depending on the night, but it is always a reminder that the line between perception and creation is gentler and more permeable than we assume. Even physics, the discipline often seen as the most grounded, nods to this idea in its own soft way. The world is not a rigid sculpture, but a collection of possibilities that settle into shape only when conditions allow. Instead of describing this with symbols, we can imagine it as a field of tiny lanterns, each one representing a possible version of a moment, flickering quietly until your attention chooses a single one to glow fully. The lantern you see becomes your experience. The others fade back into the background of could-have-beens. Understanding this does not require doubting reality. It simply invites a subtler appreciation of how the world arrives to us. Reality is not handed to us like a completed book. It is co-authored, line by line, by the world and the mind working together. This partnership is not a flaw. It is a gift, one that allows meaning, creativity, and choice to shape the spaces we live in. As you continue to drift through this exploration, you might find comfort in knowing that your reality is not fixed or predetermined. It is responsive, like a gentle companion adjusting its steps to match your pace. Your thoughts, your memories, your quiet hopes, all of them help shape the world you experience. And in recognizing this, you may feel a small sense of freedom, as though a window has opened and the air is moving more softly through the room. When you think of reality, you might picture something simple and straightforward, a world made of solid objects, arranged in space, moving through time. But if you look a little closer, the picture begins to unfold into layers, almost like lifting the pages of a quiet pop-up book, where each page reveals another hidden structure behind the last. This layered nature of the world isn't something exotic or overly scientific. It is something you witness every day without noticing, the way you might walk past an old tree without thinking about the hidden rings marking its history. Tonight, we can gently pause and look at those rings together, not to categorize them or memorize them, but simply to feel how they shape the way reality reaches us. Imagine you are holding a cup of warm tea. On one layer, the tea is just a soothing heat in your palms, a soft swirl of scent, a comfort fading upward into your breath. On a deeper layer, it is made of molecules, tiny patterns of movement, water drifting round leaves. On another layer still, those molecules are made of atoms, small clusters trembling with the energy of their environment. And beneath that, even smaller structures exist, particles that flicker between states of being, responding to conditions the way a chime responds to the slightest breeze. None of these layers contradict the others. They are different ways of looking at the same cup, like different melodies built from the same notes. This is the first hint that reality is not one thing but many things at once. The cup of tea, the warmth in your hand, the molecules drifting inside it, the particles forming those molecules, the feelings you have while drinking it. All of these are true. Which reality matters depends on what you're trying to understand. A chemist sees molecular bonds where you see comfort. A physicist sees vibrations where you see flavor. A poet sees nostalgia where a neuroscientist sees neurotransmitters. Each is perceiving a layer of the same event, the same moment, expressed in a different language. The structure of life works the same way. Your body appears as a whole, arms, legs, breath moving in and out, but beneath that surface lies another world. Muscles weaving like threads, blood carrying warmth, cells working as individual little rooms. Beneath the cells lie organelles, and beneath those lie molecules arranging themselves in patterns that allow life to continue. And beneath molecules, as always, lie smaller and smaller structures, each one supporting the next. You never see this hierarchy directly, yet it exists quietly inside you, helping you walk, speak, rest, and dream. If you look outward, towards society, the layering continues. A city is a collection of buildings and roads, but also a web of human intentions, memories, routines, and shared understandings. A conversation is a pattern of sound waves, but also a bridge of meaning. Even a simple gesture, holding a door open for someone, carries both physical reality and emotional significance. These layers do not compete, they enrich one another. Without the physical world, none of the other layers could function. But without the emotional and social layers, the physical world would feel remarkably empty. Some physicists describe matter in the universe using equations, but instead of focusing on symbols, we can imagine those equations as a kind of quiet music. Each particle has a melody, not a tune you can hear, but a rhythm of conditions it responds to. When particles come together, their melodies overlap, forming chords that hold atoms together. When atoms gather in patterns, those chords create molecules. And when molecules arrange themselves into something as intricate as a cell, it is like many instruments joining into an orchestra. Biology is the sound the orchestra makes. Feeling, thinking, and perceiving are the harmonies rising above the instruments themselves. Seen this way, reality is like a vast symphony with many sections. You can listen to the string section if you want, the gentle events happening at the scale of human experience. You can listen to the deep percussion, the steady patterns of atoms forming everything around you. Or you can drift up to the faint high-pitched notes, the delicate movements of particles that flicker in and out of possibility. You never lose the symphony by focusing on one section. You simply hear it from a different seat in the grand hall of existence. What makes this layered view so comforting is that it softens the tension between different explanations of the world. Some people prefer to understand reality through physics, others prefer psychology, others through meaning or spirituality or relationships. None of these are wrong. They are different ways of placing your hand on the same world. When a physicist describes the universe in terms of energy fields, that is one layer. When a philosopher speaks of consciousness as the foundation of experience, that is another. When a poet describes reality as the vibration of emotion, yet another layer appears. Each one reveals something the others cannot. Even ancient wisdom traditions understood this multiplicity. They spoke of a world of form and a world of experience, a world of matter and a world of mind, intertwined like branches of the same tree. They were observing the same layered structure in their own way. The language was different, but the gesture, the attempt to describe the world from many angles, was the same. You can experience the layering yourself by thinking of simple everyday events. When you listen to rain, the sound is not only water striking the ground, it is also the memory of other rainy nights, the emotion it brings, the thoughts it awakens. When you taste a piece of fruit, there is the material sensation, but also the small moment of pleasure, the memory of a childhood orchard, or simply the feeling of being alive in that instant. Each event carries multiple truths woven into one. The important thing is not to decide which layer is real. The important thing is to notice that reality does not limit itself to a single description. It opens itself through many doors, and you walk through those doors depending on what you need in that moment. Clarity, comfort, meaning, curiosity, or rest. All of these are valid ways of meeting the world. As we continue exploring, it may help to imagine reality as a lantern with many sides. When you turn it, the patterns of light shift. Nothing untrue has happened. You have simply seen another facet of the same glow. This softness, this idea that the world is richer than any one explanation, can make the mystery feel less intimidating. You don't have to grasp everything at once. You can let the layers unfold at their own gentle pace, like petals opening to the morning. There is a quiet moment, often arriving in the middle of an ordinary day, when you realize that the world you move through is not just made of objects, light, and sound. It is also made of stories, gentle, persistent, and often invisible. These stories do not appear as sentences or paragraphs. Instead, they take the form of small expectations, instincts, and beliefs that shape how each moment feels. And, just like two people can read the same book and walk away with different impressions, two people can live through the same event and remember entirely different worlds. The event is the same, the stories are not. You can picture these stories as threads woven through your experience. Some threads are old, handed down from parents, teachers, communities, and cultures. Others are woven quietly by you, formed from memories, hopes, and the meanings you assign to things. These stories are not illusions. They are the interpretive frameworks that give the world a sense of coherence. Without them, daily life would be overwhelming. Too many sensations, too many choices, too much information arriving without guidance. Stories act as soft lanterns lighting the path ahead, helping you navigate. In many ancient traditions, this idea appears in different forms. In Buddhist philosophy, there's often mention of how perception is shaped by mental habits, patterns of thought that colour the world before you're even aware of them. In Western philosophy, thinkers like Immanuel Kant suggested that the mind organises experience into categories before you ever encounter the world consciously. And in modern neuroscience, the concept returns once again dressed in the language of predictive processing, where the brain constructs a model of the world and continuously updates it. It is striking how these perspectives, separated by thousands of miles and hundreds of years, still echo one another. They suggest that reality is not simply something you encounter, it is something you participate in. The universe may offer raw sensations, but the mind weaves them into a world you can understand. This weaving does not diminish the reality of things, it simply adds depth to it. A physical landscape becomes a remembered childhood field. A room becomes a place of comfort or tension, depending on the story you bring into it. Stories shape the emotional climate around you, as certainly as weather shapes the air. There is an old image that appears in many cultures, the fable of blind people touching different parts of an elephant. One touches the trunk and says reality is like a snake. Another touches the leg and says it is like a pillar. Another touches the ear and says it is like a leaf. None of them are wrong. They are all touching the same animal, but from different angles. This story appears in Indian traditions, Chinese stories, Buddhist texts, and even in the writings of the Greek philosopher Sextus Empiricus. It is one of humanity's oldest reminders that the world does not look the same from every perspective. Modern science mirrors this lesson in its own quiet way. Physics describes the world in terms of forces, fields, and interactions. Chemistry sees patterns of bonding and transformation. Biology sees living systems growing and adapting. Psychology sees attention, memory, and emotion. Sociology sees networks of meaning, culture, and shared behaviour. Each discipline touches a different part of the same universe. Together they offer a richer picture than any one perspective could provide alone. When you listen to scientists debating the nature of reality, or philosophers considering the foundations of experience, it might seem like they disagree on everything. But if you listen closely, you begin to hear something more subtle. Many are simply describing different layers of the same phenomenon. The physicist focuses on the underlying structure, the philosopher on the meaning, the contemplative practitioner on the direct experience of awareness. Each voice is different truth. Each is touching the same elephant. This idea becomes even clearer when you consider how attention shapes experience. Attention is not just a spotlight shining on a specific part of the world. It is more like a delicate tuning mechanism that adjusts your entire experience depending on what you focus on. When you pay attention to your breath, your interior world slows down. When you focus on a sound in the distance, the rest of the world softens. When you attend to a memory, the present moment becomes tinged with the colour of the past. In a room full of people, you might notice only the person speaking. But if you shift your attention, you may suddenly hear the hum of an air conditioner, feel the weight of your clothing, or notice a pattern of sunlight crossing the floor. These experiences were always there. They simply waited for your attention to bring them forward. In this way, attention gently crafts your reality, shaping which parts of the world step forward and which parts fade quietly into the background. Stories and attention work together like two hands shaping clay. Attention chooses the material, stories mold it. If you believe the world is full of danger, attention will find the smallest sign of threat. If you believe the world is full of beauty, attention will find moments of it, even on an ordinary day. None of this requires changing the physical environment. It is the inner world, the interpretive world, that adjusts. And through that adjustment, reality shifts. This is not limited to individuals. Entire cultures build shared stories that give shape to their realities. Some cultures view time as a straight line, always moving forward, while others see it as a circle. Some believe the natural world is alive with spirit, while others view it as separate from human life. These cultural narratives guide how people see themselves, how they understand their purpose, and how they relate to the world around them. The world does not change from one culture to the next, but the meaning woven into it does. Even scientific communities rely on stories, carefully crafted models that guide research. These models are not fantasies, they are maps. A scientific model is a story about how the world behaves, written in a language of gentle rules and observed patterns. Equations, when translated softly, are simply ways of saying when this happens that tends to follow. These stories shift as understanding deepens. In this sense, science is a story that corrects itself, refining old chapters and writing new ones as more is learned. As you sit with these ideas, you might begin to sense that reality is not a single narrative, but a tapestry woven from many perspectives. You do not need to choose between them. You can simply let them coexist, each adding a shade of colour to your understanding. The physicist's explanation does not erase the poet's. The neuroscientist's insight does not negate the philosopher's. Instead, each view enriches the others, helping you see the world with greater softness and subtlety. The beauty of this layered storytelling is that it allows you to meet reality gently. You don't need to grasp everything at once. You can let stories guide you, shift you, comfort you, or challenge you. You can wander from one perspective to another the way you might walk through rooms of a quiet museum, each one offering a different atmosphere. And in doing so, you come closer to understanding the world not as a single object, but as a living, breathing, shimmering field of experience shaped by both the outside and the inside. There is an ancient story, older than most languages still spoken today, about a group of people who live their entire lives inside a dimly lit cave. They sit facing a wall, unable to turn around, watching shadows dance in front of them. These shadows come from objects carried behind them, illuminated by a fire they never see. For the people in the cave, the shadows are the whole of reality. They laugh at them, fear them, interpret them, and build their understanding of life around them. But none of the shadows are the full truth. They are flickers, silhouettes, faint outlines of something richer and brighter waiting outside. This tale, known as Plato's Cave, is often presented as a grand philosophical argument, but tonight we can hold it more gently. Instead of debating it, imagine yourself as one of those people in the quiet half-darkness watching the shadows shift. It's a strangely comforting image, a reminder that all of us in different ways sit facing our own cave walls. The shadows we see might be perceptions shaped by the brain, stories shaped by culture, or layers of reality shaped by biology. None of them are wrong, they are simply incomplete. The world beyond the cave is larger than what any one perspective can capture. Plato offered this story as a way to soften certainty. He wanted to show that even when we feel convinced that we know what is real, there might be more waiting behind us. A glow just out of view, a deeper world we've not yet encountered. His cave isn't a warning as much as an invitation. It asks us to remain curious, to let our understanding of reality stay flexible, to remember that the shadows we see might be only one expression of something larger. Centuries later, a philosopher named René Descartes approached the question of reality from a different angle. Instead of focusing on shadows and caves, he turned inward. He sat with his thoughts and began peeling away everything he could doubt. He could doubt his senses, since they sometimes deceived him. He could doubt the physical world, since dreams could mimic waking life. He could even doubt his own body. When he set aside everything uncertain, he found that one thing remained: the simple fact that something was thinking, something was aware. That quiet awareness, he concluded, was undeniable. Tonight, instead of treating this as a heavy logical argument, we can hold it gently, like a smooth river stone. Descartes wasn't merely trying to prove something. He was trying to describe an experience many of us have had at night, lying awake and wondering what it means to exist. When the world feels blurry or strange, when memories feel distant and the sense of self loosens, something still remains. A soft presence behind all experience, a noticing, a simple awareness of I am here. Even if everything else feels uncertain, that quiet presence stays. Plato and Descartes, separated by centuries, were both pointing toward a similar mystery. They were asking where our sense of reality comes from. Plato suggested that our senses give us shadows of the real world. Descartes suggested that our senses sometimes mislead us. Both gently nudged people toward the idea that the world we experience might not be the world as it is, but the world as it appears through our limited tools, our senses, our expectations, our understanding. In modern times, neuroscience echoes this with surprising harmony. Instead of speaking of shadows or doubts, neuroscientists describe perception as an active process. The mind takes the scattered bits of information arriving from the senses and arranges them into a coherent picture. But this picture is not direct. It is filtered, predicted, corrected, and interpreted before we ever become conscious of it. You might think of it as watching a finished film without seeing the editing room behind the scenes. Physics too joins the conversation, not with symbols or dense equations, but with a gentle reminder. The world is not always what it seems. Solid objects are mostly empty space. Time is not an absolute flow, but a dimension woven together with space. Matter behaves differently depending on how we observe it. Instead of writing these ideas with symbols, we can imagine them as a soft shimmering beneath the surface of everyday experience. The universe, at its foundations, is less like a rigid machine and more like a dynamic fabric that responds to conditions, relationships, and the act of observation itself. When you combine these perspectives, the philosopher's doubt, the neuroscientist's model building, the physicist's subtle fabric of reality, something interesting emerges. They all suggest that what we experience is only part of a larger picture, and this isn't meant to diminish the world we know, it's meant to enrich it. Reality becomes not a single, unchanging block, but a layered phenomenon with depths and textures we rarely notice. Think of a simple example. Imagine standing by a quiet lake at dusk. The surface of the water reflects the sky, the trees, the first evening stars. If you look only at the surface, you might think the lake is made entirely of reflections. But beneath that surface lie cool currents, drifting plants, fish gliding silently. Beneath the fish lie sediment layers shaped over centuries, and beneath those layers are minerals, ancient rock, and the slow geological movements that shaped the land long before you arrived. All of these aspects are real. Some are visible, others are not. But the lake would not be the lake without any one of them. This is how Plato and Descartes saw reality, as something with more beneath the surface than most people realize. Their goal was not to confuse or frighten, but to encourage a gentle openness, a willingness to look in directions we do not usually consider. Philosophical doubt in their eyes was not a weapon, it was a lantern. Doubt illuminated possibilities. It allowed people to explore without assuming they already knew everything. In your own life, you may have experienced small moments where your sense of reality shifted. Perhaps a memory resurfaced and changed the way you saw a familiar place. Perhaps a dream felt so vivid that waking life seemed softer in comparison. Perhaps you looked at someone you thought you knew well and suddenly noticed something new in their expression. These moments are hints that reality is not fixed. It is something that responds to attention, context, and meaning. Much like the cave shadows, it moves gently across the walls we face, inviting us to turn, to listen, to reconsider. As we continue our exploration, the goal is not to prove one viewpoint right or wrong. Instead, it is to appreciate how these different ways of thinking, philosophical, scientific, contemplative, help us see the world with more subtlety. Reality is not a riddle that must be solved. It is a companion that reveals different sides of itself, depending on where you stand, what you wonder, and how gently you look. There is something quietly comforting about time when we imagine it the way we experience it. A soft flow that begins in the past, passes through the present, and drifts gently into the future. We picture it like a river, always moving in one direction, carrying moments the way water carries leaves downstream. We feel this movement in our bones, in the way mornings become afternoons, in the way seasons change, in the way memories settle behind us like faint lights in a valley. But modern physics invites us to consider a different picture, one that is less like a river and more like an expansive landscape. Imagine a book resting on a table. All the chapters exist at once, the first, the last, and every page in between. You can open the book anywhere and experience the story from that point forward. Yet the other chapters do not disappear simply because you are not reading them. They remain quietly in place, waiting. Physics suggests that time may be like this, not a flow, but a collection of moments, all existing together in a vast structure sometimes called the block universe. Instead of thinking of time as a line moving forward, we can imagine it as a tapestry woven from threads of past, present, and future, each one part of the same fabric. When this idea was first introduced through Einstein's theory of relativity, it surprised people. It felt too still, too expansive, almost like looking at time from above rather than living inside it. But when explained softly, the idea becomes less intimidating. It simply suggests that every moment, the day you learn to ride a bicycle, the cup of tea you may drink tomorrow morning, the memories you have not yet made, may already exist in a four-dimensional space-time structure. We do not move through time like passengers on a train. Instead, our consciousness wanders along this landscape, sensing one moment at a time, the way a flashlight reveals only the part of a forest directly in its beam. This does not mean the future is fixed in a hard, unyielding way. Even physicists differ in how they interpret the block universe. Some describe it as a map with certain regions not yet fully shaped. Others imagine it as a structure where possibility and choice play roles we do not yet fully understand. Instead of visualizing this as a rigid stone monument, it may be easier to picture it as a quiet garden at night. The garden exists in its entirety, but you walk through it step by step, discovering one corner at a time. The rest of the garden is present, but it does not intrude until you arrive. One of the reasons this view feels strange is because our bodies and minds were not built to sense time this way. We evolved to experience moments sequentially, one after the other, like beads on a string. This sense of flow helps us survive. It lets us plan, remember, anticipate, and adapt. But outside our human perception, time may not be tied to flow at all. Physicists sometimes describe the speed of light, in gentle words, as a kind of universal limit that connects time and space. It is not the number itself that matters for our purposes, but what it represents. A reminder that time bends, stretches, and warps depending on movement and gravity. If you travel very fast, close to the speed at which light journeys, time would slow down for you compared to someone who stayed still. Not slow in the sense of ticking clocks lagging, but slow in the deep physical sense of your entire experience unfolding more gently. You would age more slowly. Memories would form differently. The world you left behind would race ahead. This phenomenon is sometimes called time dilation, but tonight we can imagine it as a soft stretching of the timeline, the universe allowing two travelers to move through moments at different rates, like two streams trickling through different parts of a valley. Gravity also shapes time. Near a massive object, a planet, a star, time flows more slowly. Again, no symbols or formulas are needed. You can imagine it as the curvature of a blanket. A heavy stone placed on the fabric creates a dip. Objects rolling nearby fall into that dip. Time behaves similarly. Where gravity is strong, the fabric of space-time curves more deeply, causing moments to unfold at a gentler pace. Far from massive objects, the fabric is flatter, and time flows more freely. This idea, when written in equations, can appear dense and intimidating. But as an image, it becomes intuitive, a simple consequence of living in a physical world that bends and stretches. These concepts lead to a question that has lingered in philosophy for centuries. If time is part of a larger structure, what does it mean to say that now is special? Why do we feel only one moment at a time? Why can we remember the past but not the future? Some thinkers describe the mind as an artist who paints each moment over the previous one, allowing only a single frame of the landscape to fully occupy consciousness. Others invoke memory as a system that flows in one direction because it is tied to warmth, energy, and the gentle increase of disorder in the universe, something physicists call entropy. Instead of defining entropy as a mathematical ratio, we can picture it as the tendency of neat structures to loosen over time. An ice cube melts, a room becomes cluttered, order relaxes into softness. This one-way relaxation gives time its arrow, even if the block universe holds every moment simultaneously. There is something deeply human about continuing to feel time as a river, even if physics whispers that it might be a structure. The flow is part of who we are. It is how we make meaning. Birth, childhood, growth, friendships, loss, all rely on the sense of moments unfolding. Even if time is a landscape, it is the journey through it that gives our lives shape and story. We walk from moment to moment gathering memories, understanding, and quiet wisdom, the way a traveller gathers pebbles from a shoreline. This duality, time as flow in experience and time as structure in physics, doesn't need to be resolved. Instead, it can be held gently, like two hands cupping the same bowl. The physical description tells us something about the universe's architecture. The experiential description tells us something about the human heart. Together, they form a fuller picture than either could alone. The block universe invites us to consider the possibility that every moment is connected in ways we cannot fully perceive. The river invites us to appreciate the present, the single leaf drifting on, the the current. Both images can settle softly into the mind, allowing us to explore the nature of time with curiosity rather than certainty. If you've ever sat in a dark room and watched curtains stir in a gentle breeze, you may have noticed how the fabric moves before you can fully see the shape it's taking. It shimmers, lifts, falls, and seems to hold many possible forms at once. Only when the curtain settles do you notice its pattern clearly. This simple moment is an unexpectedly fitting doorway into the quantum world, a place where reality has not yet chosen its final shape, where possibilities coexist softly like folds in a drifting curtain. Quantum mechanics can feel intimidating when described in the language of symbols, but we don't need any of that here. We can approach it instead through images, stories, and quiet metaphors, the way you might explain constellations to someone by tracing shapes gently in the sky rather than listing coordinates. Quantum physics tells us that at very small scales, far smaller than dust, smaller than the cells in your body, smaller even than the particles inside atoms, the universe behaves in ways that defy the logic of everyday experience. But beneath the strangeness is something surprisingly gentle, a world of maybes waiting patiently for conditions to guide them into becoming. Imagine holding a lantern in your hands. Before you light it, the darkness around you holds countless possibilities. You cannot see clearly, but everything that could be seen is present in potential. When you lift the lantern's flame and the light falls on a specific corner of the room, that corner reveals itself. The details of the floor, the shape of a table, the folds of a blanket. In quantum physics, before the light of observation touches something, its properties, its position, its movement, even its identity, exist in a state that is not fixed, not unreal, but not settled. When measured or observed, that shimmering range of possibilities gently collapses into a single outcome. It's not that your attention forces the world into being. Rather, the act of interacting with the world brings out one of the possibilities that already lived quietly in the background. Physicists use the term superposition to describe this state of many possibilities coexisting, but we can imagine it more simply. Picture a quiet room early in the morning, the curtains drawn, shadows shifting. You don't yet know the exact shape of everything inside, but the shapes are there, waiting. Once sunlight enters the room, details become clear. Quantum events are like the early morning room, a place where reality holds many potential shapes until conditions clarify the picture. Another idea often associated with quantum mechanics is something called uncertainty. It doesn't mean randomness or chaos. Instead, it's a soft reminder that certain properties cannot be pinned down perfectly at the same time. We can describe this without symbols by imagining a firefly drifting through tall grass at night. You can see its glow for a moment, but not its exact movement. Or you can follow its movement, but lose track of the glow. Trying to see both perfectly at once is impossible. The universe, at its smallest scales, has this same gentle limitation. It's not hiding information from us. It's simply behaving in a way that doesn't match our everyday expectations. Then there is the famous idea of particles seeming to influence one another even when they are far apart, something physicists call entanglement. Instead of thinking of it as a rigid rule, we can imagine two candles lit from the same flame. Even if you place them on opposite sides of a room, the glow of one candle still subtly reminds you of the other. They share a kind of quiet origin, a link that persists even when separated by distance. In the quantum world, this link is more than metaphor. When two particles share a connection, their behavior reflects that connection no matter how far apart they travel. It is as if they whisper to one another across space, keeping their stories aligned. Some interpretations of quantum physics go even further. The many worlds view suggests that when reality chooses between possibilities, it may not discard the unchosen ones. Instead, every possibility might unfold in its own branch of a larger reality, like roots spreading underground, hidden but present. We don't need to imagine literal copies of ourselves. It is enough to picture a tree in winter. You see the trunk clearly, but beneath the soil are countless branches spreading outward, unseen, intricate, interconnected. The quantum world may hold a branching structure that we experience only through one path at a time. There is a delicate beauty in this, a universe that is not rigid but responsive, soft at the edges, full of unrealized paths that shimmer before settling. When quantum physics is described with heavy symbols, it can feel cold or mechanical. But beneath those symbols lies a world that behaves more like a quiet ocean under moonlight, waves of possibility rising and falling, movements guided by gentle rhythms rather than strict commands. One reason quantum ideas feel strange is that our daily experience trains us to expect solidity and predictability. A cup stays on a table, a stone falls when dropped. But at scales too small to see, the universe dances to a subtler rhythm. It is not random, not chaotic, and not magical, simply different. And this difference may be a clue that reality has more layers than we typically notice. The everyday world is the calm surface of a vast ocean, steady and predictable. But beneath that surface lies a depth where currents move in ways we don't directly feel, but that still shape everything above. As we move through life, we rarely think about these hidden currents, but knowing they exist can soften our sense of certainty. If the universe itself holds possibilities so gently, perhaps our own lives are shaped by a similar openness. Choices, paths, moments of hesitation or wonder, all may contain more potential than we recognize. The quantum world reminds us that uncertainty is not a flaw. It is a feature of existence, a quiet source of flexibility and surprise. You don't need to master the technical details to feel the importance of this. It's enough to picture the world behind the curtain, a realm where particles shimmer between maybes, where connections stretch across distance, where potential rests before becoming real. And as you consider this, perhaps there is comfort in knowing that reality is far more expansive than the narrow slice we experience. It holds mysteries not as riddles to be solved, but as reminders that the universe is alive with possibility. There is a quiet moment in every clear night when the stars seem almost still, as if the sky is holding its breath. Their positions feel precise, their distances measured, their motions steady. It's easy to forget that beneath this peaceful view lies an astonishing insight. Nature behaves with a kind of subtle order, a structure that can be described with patterns so consistent that they begin to resemble something almost musical. This is where the idea emerges, whispered first by ancient thinkers and later echoed by modern physicists, that the universe might not just follow mathematical rules, but might be mathematical in its deepest essence. To explore this without stiffness or symbols, imagine mathematics not as numbers on a chalkboard, but as patterns found everywhere. Picture the way branches of a tree divide into smaller branches, how rivers split into tributaries, how snowflakes shape themselves with delicate symmetry. These repeating structures are not coincidences. They reflect a quiet architecture woven into the world. If you've ever watched waves forming patterns on the shore, or noticed the spiral in a seashell, you've glimpsed this architecture without needing equations to name it. Many scientists have wondered whether these patterns are hints of something deeper, something like an underlying language. But instead of calling it math, we can think of it as a kind of natural grammar. rules that shape how things move, grow, combine, and change. This grammar is not written in ink or carved in stone. It is expressed through relationships. When a plant grows toward light, there is a relationship between the plant and the sunlight. When planets orbit a star, there is a relationship between mass and distance. These relationships, described softly, are simply, when this happens, that responds. Nature appears to speak in these relationships everywhere, across scales large and small. Long before modern science, thinkers like Pythagoras believed that harmony, the kind found in musical strings vibrating together, revealed something essential about how the world is built. He noticed that plucking a string at different lengths created notes that sounded pleasing because the ratios between the vibrations were simple and consistent. To him, this was not just a musical curiosity. It was a window into the structure of reality itself, a sign that the world might be arranged according to harmonious proportions. Many centuries later, Johannes Kepler watched the planets move and sensed that same harmony. Instead of describing their motion with symbols, we can picture it as a celestial dance, each planet tracing an elegant path, each movement fitting into a greater rhythm. Today, physicists use gentle patterns to describe how particles behave, how gravity curves space, how light travels through emptiness. The symbols on the page are simply shorthand for these patterns. The patterns themselves are what matter. Modern thinkers, such as the scientist Max Tegmark, have proposed a bold idea that the universe may not just follow mathematical patterns, but might actually be a structure made entirely of relationships, like a vast shape held together not by material pieces, but by the way those pieces interact. In simpler words, reality might be less like a solid sculpture and more like a story of connections, an intricate web where meaning arises from how things fit together, not from what they are made of. This might sound abstract, but you can feel traces of it in everyday life. Consider a melody. A song is not the instrument, not the musician, not the sheet of notes. A song is the pattern of sound woven through time. It is something that exists not as a material object but as a relationship among vibrations, and yet a song feels real. It moves you. It stays with you. In the same way, reality might be a grand composition of patterns and relationships, expressed through space, matter, and energy. Another place where this idea appears is in the fine details of the universe. Scientists have noticed that certain fundamental values, the weight of particles, the strength of forces, the subtle balance between expansion and collapse, are adjusted so delicately that if they were even slightly different, stars would not form, planets would not exist, and life would never arise. Instead of calling these values constants, we can think of them as settings on a delicate instrument. If the knobs were turned just a little, the music would fade or distort. The fact that the universe plays such a harmonious melody raises a quiet question. Is this precision a coincidence, or is it a sign that the universe is built from a deeper, perhaps mathematical, blueprint? Some argue that mathematics is simply a tool, something humans invented to describe the world, but others feel that mathematics is discovered, not created. They see mathematical patterns everywhere, not just in human thought, but in the fabric of nature. This debate mirrors the larger mystery we're exploring. Does reality exist independently of our minds, or does our mind reveal patterns that are already woven into existence? To hold this gently, imagine walking through a forest. You notice the spacing between trees, the arcs of branches, the way sunlight scatters across leaves. You don't need equations to sense the order. You simply feel it. A quiet alignment that makes the experience soothing, as if the forest were composed in a way that naturally resonates with the human mind. Perhaps this harmony reflects the structure of the mind, or perhaps it reflects something deeper, the structure of the world itself. There is a comforting thought here. If the universe is built from patterns, then everything in it, including you, is part of that patterning. Your thoughts, your memories, your sense of self. They follow gentle rhythms shaped by biology, experience and awareness. You may not always feel attuned or balanced, but you are part of the same vast composition that shapes stars and seashells, rivers and galaxies. What does it mean then to say the universe might be mathematical? Not that reality is cold or mechanical, not that it is made of numbers instead of matter. Rather, it suggests that underneath a variety of forms, light, sound, emotion, memory, lies a quiet coherence, an order that allows things to exist, interact, and become. A structure that gives rise to beauty, symmetry, creativity, and complexity. Whether mathematics is the blueprint of reality, or simply the best language we have for describing patterns, the result is the same. The universe unfolds with a harmony that invites us to listen. Not with our ears, but with our attention, with our curiosity, with the part of us that feels awe when we look up at the night sky and sense that the stars are not just scattered points of light, but notes in a cosmic arrangement. As we move forward, we don't need to decide whether the universe is mathematics. It is enough to appreciate the elegance of its patterns, the quiet order beneath its complexity, and the way those patterns make the world both understandable and full of mystery. In that balance between clarity and wonder, we find one of the softest, most beautiful aspects of reality, a world shaped by relationships, resonances, and the gentle music of the cosmos. There is a quiet beauty in watching something familiar become mysterious again. A cup on the table, a wooden chair, a passing cloud. Things that seem so ordinary begin to soften when we look closely. Their shapes no longer as firm as they once appeared. This softening is at the heart of what Buddhist thinkers call emptiness. Not emptiness in the sense of nothingness or void, but emptiness in the sense of lack of fixed, separate essence. It is the idea that everything we see, touch, or feel is the result of many conditions leaning gently upon one another, like a cluster of reeds standing because each reed supports the rest. If you imagine a flower blooming in early morning light, it becomes clear the flower is not a single isolated object. It exists because of soil, rain, sunlight, air, pollinators, temperature, and time itself. Remove any one of these conditions, and the flower you see today would not be here. In this way, the flower is not an independent thing, but a meeting point where many conditions touch for a brief moment. This is what Buddhists mean when they say the flower is empty of a fixed essence. It does not exist on its own. It is woven from countless threads. This idea, known as dependent origination, can feel abstract until you realize you experience it constantly. Consider laughter. It doesn't exist in isolation. Sit as somewhere in your chest waiting to be released. It happens only when conditions align, a memory that surfaces, a playful moment with a friend, the sudden joy of something unexpected. Even your sense of identity is shaped by conditions. Your childhood, the languages you speak, the people who raised you, the stories you carry inside. Everything, including you, leans gently on everything else. Buddhist teachers often demonstrate this through everyday images. They say reality is like a wave rising on the surface of the ocean. The wave appears separate and distinct, tall, curved, moving across the water. But without the ocean beneath it, without the wind blowing across the surface, without the depth of the water holding it up, the wave could not exist. It is empty of independent existence. It is a shape created by conditions. And when those conditions shift, the wave returns quietly to the sea. Modern physics, surprisingly, echoes this ancient insight, not in the language of meditation, but in the language of relationship. Physicists describe how particles do not possess properties on their own. Their characteristics arise through interactions. Instead of saying this particle exists as a solid, separate entity, they say, this particle exists in a network of relationships, defined by how it interacts with others. This view is sometimes called relational physics, a perspective that gently suggests nothing stands alone. Everything is part of something larger, shaped by what surrounds it. If we translate this into softer imagery, we can picture reality as a web of shimmering threads. At each intersection of threads, a moment arises, a feeling, a sound, a sensation, a memory. Nothing in the web exists by itself. Each moment, each form, each experience is held in place by countless other threads, stretching outward into the vastness. Pull one thread, and others shift. Let one go, and the pattern changes. This idea can be comforting, especially at night, when the world feels still. It reminds us that even if we sometimes feel alone, we are made of connections. Every breath relies on trees and oceans. Every thought relies on language taught by others. Every emotion arises through conditions woven throughout our lives. There is no isolated self floating separately from the world. There's only interdependence, a gentle mutual leaning. Understanding emptiness does not require withdrawing from life or rejecting the world. In fact, the opposite is true. When you see that everything is conditioned, everything becomes precious. The moment you're living right now is happening only once, held in place by a constellation of conditions that may never gather in the same way again. The breeze outside, the sounds drifting through your room, the temperature of the air, the subtle movement of your own breathing. All of it is a temporary arrangement, a fleeting harmony. Some people fear that emptiness means nothing matters, but in Buddhism, emptiness means everything matters because everything is interconnected. When you touch one part of the web, the whole web trembles. When you speak a kind word, its effects ripple outward. When you harm something, the impacts return in ways you cannot predict. Understanding emptiness nurtures compassion, because you begin to feel that caring for others is, in a deep sense, caring for yourself. You might notice hints of this interdependence in simple daily experiences. When you sit beside someone who is calm, your own breath slows. When someone near you is tense, your shoulders rise without thinking. Your reality shifts with theirs, like two tuning forks resonating in sympathy. Even your thoughts arise from a dialogue between past and present, memories blending with sensations, expectations shaping perception. Reality is always co-authored. This idea appears not only in Buddhist philosophy, but in contemplative traditions around the world. Indigenous cultures often describe the world as living, interconnected, and relational. Mystics from different religions speak of unity, interbeing, or a single underlying essence. Science too acknowledges interdependence. Ecosystems rely on balance. Physics relies on interaction. Biology relies on networks. Each discipline touches different part of the same truth. Tonight, as you sit with the idea of emptiness, you may feel a subtle shift. Instead of imagining the world as made of rigid objects, you might begin to picture it as a continuous flow of conditions forming and dissolving. Not a world of separate things, but a world of relationships unfolding moment by moment, like ripples across a pond. There is gentleness in this image. If things have no fixed essence, they can change. If the self is not a solid object, it can soften. If reality is a web, we are never truly isolated. Everything arises together. Everything fades together. Everything leans on everything else. and in that leaning, the world finds its balance, delicate, shifting, alive. If you close your eyes for a moment and simply notice whatever is unfolding inside, the faint hum of breath, the warmth in your hands, a soft flicker of thought passing by, you may realize something subtle but profound. Even when the world outside feels uncertain or distant, something is still happening. Awareness itself is present, like a quiet flame that continues to glow no matter how dark the room becomes. This simple presence is the heart of our exploration tonight. The idea that consciousness is not merely something you have, but something that is happening, moment by moment, without effort, without command. Buddhist scholars often describe consciousness as the only phenomenon we can know with complete certainty. Everything else, the chair beneath you, the sounds outside your window, the memories drifting through your mind, is filtered through perception, interpretation, and story. But the simple fact that experience is unfolding right now does not require proof. You don't need to believe in consciousness. You just notice it, the way you notice warmth on your skin when sunlight falls across your arm. Awareness is immediate, self-evident, quietly undeniable. Some contemplative teachers phrase this gently. We do not know whether the world exists independently as we imagine it, but we do know that awareness of something is happening. This is not meant to cast doubt on the world or suggest it is unreal. Instead, it brings attention to the immediate truth that everything we know, everything we feel, everything we understand arrives through the doorway of consciousness. Without awareness, there is no world, at least not one you can experience. To approach this softly, imagine waking before dawn when the room is still dark. For a moment, you don't know where you are. The shapes around you are vague, the air cool, the world not yet fully assembled. But even in that uncertainty, there is a sense of being here, a simple knowing that you exist in some form. You might not know the details, what time it is, what day, or even what dream you came from. But something is awake, something is aware. This awareness is not a thing you can point to. It has no colour, no shape, no size. You can't touch it or weigh it, and yet everything you experience floats within it like lanterns drifting on a still pond. Sensations appear, linger, fade. Thoughts rise and dissolve, emotions bloom and soften. The awareness behind them remains steady, the quiet background in which all other events unfold. We often speak of consciousness as if it belongs to us, my awareness, my thoughts, my experience. But some traditions invite us to consider a gentler view, that consciousness is not so much a possession as it is a field we participate in. Much like a mirror reflects whatever stands before it, awareness reflects sensations and thoughts without becoming them. The mirror is not defined by the images it shows. Similarly, consciousness is not defined by the thoughts and feelings that pass through it. If we think of the mind as a wide open sky, then individual experiences are like clouds, sometimes bright, sometimes heavy, sometimes fleeting. They move through, but the sky remains open. This image has appeared in countless contemplative traditions, not because it is poetic, but because it points toward an unmistakable aspect of experience. No matter what thoughts arise, no matter what emotions sweep through, something in you is aware of them. That awareness itself stays untouched. The difference between saying I am conscious and consciousness is happening is small but meaningful. The first suggests a kind of ownership, as if you stand apart from awareness, controlling it. The second suggests that awareness is something that arises naturally, like breathing or the beating of a heart. You don't create it, you don't initiate it. It simply appears moment by moment, offering a continuous stream of experience. You can sense this by noticing how thoughts come and go without your command. Ideas appear suddenly, images arise unbidden, feelings shift unexpectedly. You don't decide to think most of the thoughts that enter your mind. They simply arrive, like visitors knocking softly at your door. And yet, even as they come and go, there is an underlying presence observing them. That presence does not require effort. You don't have to hold it up or sustain it. It is simply there, quietly illuminating whatever passes through. From a scientific perspective, some thinkers describe consciousness as the result of intricate brain processes, an emergent phenomenon arising from vast networks of neurons exchanging signals. But even this view acknowledges something remarkable. No matter how those signals are arranged, the fact that experience appears is fundamentally mysterious. We can describe the brain in terms of relationships, patterns, and interactions, but these descriptions do not replace the simple reality of awareness itself. From a contemplative perspective, consciousness is the starting point. It is not something produced by the world, but the canvas on which the world appears. Whether this canvas is personal or universal, biological or fundamental, remains one of the deepest questions humans have ever asked. But regardless of the answer, the experience of awareness remains immediate and direct. To feel this more clearly, you might turn your attention inward for a moment. Notice your breath, not as an object, but as a sensation rising and falling. Notice the subtle warmth in your palms, the weight of your body resting where you sit or lie. Notice the soft sounds in the room, the hum of a fan, the distant murmur of the outside world. All of these appear within consciousness effortlessly. You don't summon them, you simply notice them, and in that noticing, awareness becomes more vivid. Even silence appears within consciousness. The absence of sound is still something you can experience. Darkness is something you can sense. Emptiness, rest, stillness, all are revealed through awareness. In this sense, consciousness is not just the container for experience, but the medium through which experience becomes real to you. When understood gently, this realization can feel grounding. The world outside may shift, seasons may change, thoughts may wander, but awareness itself remains steady. You might not always feel calm or centered, but consciousness is present even in chaos. It is the quiet backdrop behind every moment, the thread that holds each experience together. And in recognizing this presence, you may find a sense of ease gently settling into your mind. The comfort of knowing that awareness does not need to be controlled, shaped, or understood. It simply happens, like light filling a room when the sun rises. There is a gentle moment that sometimes arrives when you are half asleep, drifting, soft around the edges, when you briefly lose track of who you are. Not in a frightening way, but in a light, spacious sense, as if the usual boundaries of me loosen for just a breath. Perhaps it happens while waking from a dream, when you're not yet sure what year it is or where your body's resting. Or perhaps it happens during a long, quiet evening, when your thoughts grow soft and unfocused. In that moment, you may feel like a presence without a name, a witness without a story. This fleeting sensation offers a small clue to one of the most intriguing ideas in both philosophy and neuroscience. The self, the I, you carry through life, may not be as solid as it seems. We tend to assume the self is something stable, a core inside us, like a stone hidden beneath layers of experience. But if you watch yourself gently, with the same attention you might give to a candle flame on a still night, you might notice that the self is not an object but an ongoing process, a moment-to-moment collection of memories, sensations, hopes, fears, and interpretations, woven into a coherent story by a mind that loves continuity. Philosopher Thomas Metzinger describes this idea with unusual clarity, though we can soften it tonight. The self is a story so seamless that we forget we are the storytellers. The brain creates a model of me, a dynamic portrait that helps you navigate, plan, remember, and relate to others. You need this model the same way a ship needs a compass, not because the compass is the ship, but because it helps guide the ship across the ocean. The self model serves you, but it is not you in any absolute sense. To feel this, you might think about times when your sense of self shifts. When you're deeply absorbed in music or a book, you seem to disappear for a while. When you're embarrassed, the self feels suddenly enlarged and exposed. When you're tired or emotionally drained, the self feels faint, as though made of thin paper. When you're joyful, it feels bright and open. If the self were a fixed thing, it would not change so easily, but it does, constantly, fluidly, with every experience you have. Modern brain research supports this. Instead of a single place in the brain that contains the self, scientists see a network, a constellation of regions working together to maintain the sense of being you. When one part quiets, such as during deep meditation or a dream, the self feels lighter. When another part activates intensely, such as during stress or planning, the self feels more solid. There are even simple experiments that let people experience how flexible the self can be. One involved placing your real hand out of sight, while a mannequin hand is placed where your own would normally rest. A gentle brush is then stroked across both the fake hand and your hidden real one in perfect synchrony. After a short time, many people begin to feel the fake hand as their own, a small, harmless trick showing how easily the brain can adopt a new sense of me. Another example comes from studies where doctors apply brief, harmless electrical stimulation to certain areas near the right side of the brain. In some volunteers, this produces the sensation of floating above their bodies or observing themselves from the outside. These experiences do not suggest that the self truly leaves the body. Instead, they reveal that the sense of being located here is a construction, something the brain generates to give you a stable anchor in space. When you think of yourself as a solid entity, these examples might sound surprising. But if you think of the self as a model, a helpful representation, the pieces fit more gently. The model is usually accurate enough to navigate the world, but under certain conditions it can shift, stretch, or temporarily dissolve. This does not make it false, it makes it adaptable. There is a profound implication in this. If the self is not a fixed thing, then many of the stories we attach to it, I'm this kind of person, I always react this way, I will never change, are softer than they appear. They are habits of interpretation, not iron laws. They can evolve, they can loosen, they can heal. This is why contemplative traditions often emphasize looking at the self rather than from the self. When you observe your thoughts and emotions as passing events rather than as defining features, the self begins to feel more spacious. You might experiment with this in a simple way right now. Notice a thought arising. Perhaps it's a memory or a question, or a small curiosity about something nearby. Ask yourself gently, where did it come from? Did you choose it? Did you summon it? Most likely it simply appeared. The mind produces thoughts much like clouds form in the sky. Naturally, effortlessly. You are aware of them, but you're not creating them one by one. And just as clouds drift away, the thought will soon fade and another will take its place. The awareness that notices the thought remains steady, while the content of the thought changes. This awareness, the quiet watcher, is not the self-model. It is the space in which the model appears. And when you sense this difference, even faintly. Something softens. You realize that the self you defend, protect, describe, and sometimes struggle with is a fluid construct, not a rigid core. It is transparent in the sense that you can look through it and see the processes shaping it. This does not mean the self is unimportant. On the contrary, it is deeply useful. It allows relationships to form, responsibilities to be managed, stories to be shared. But recognizing its transparency can bring relief, especially when the self feels heavy or constrained. You're not trapped inside a permanent identity. You're an unfolding process, capable of change, adaptation, and new meaning. There is comfort in this realization. When the self feels too loud, you can remember it as a passing pattern. When it feels small or unsure, you can remember it is not fixed. When it feels bright and open, you can appreciate the conditions that allowed it to bloom. All the while, awareness, the gentle witness behind everything, remains steady and spacious. In this way, the self is less like a statue and more like a stream, always flowing, always changing, always shaped by the terrain it passes through. To recognize this is not to lose yourself, but to see yourself more clearly, a beautiful, dynamic process unfolding moment by moment. There is a quiet moment, often overlooked, when you wake in the middle of the night and the world around you feels unfamiliar. The room is the same, the walls unchanged, the furniture unmoved, yet it feels different simply because your mind has not yet assembled its usual picture of things. Slowly, as recognition returns, the world reshapes itself. The window becomes a window again. The shadows become familiar objects. The room feels like yours. Nothing in the physical world changed. What changed was the mind's interpretation, the gentle act of constructing the world from sensations, memory, and awareness. This experience is one doorway into a profound idea that several modern thinkers explore. The universe we experience may be less like a direct photograph of reality, and more like an interface, or a representation created by the mind. Not a trick or illusion, but a simplified, useful map that allows us to navigate a world far too complex to grasp directly. One version of this idea comes from what some scientists call interface theory, though we can hold it softly tonight without any technical framing. The suggestion is simple. What we perceive might not resemble the world as it truly is. Instead, our senses may work like the icons on a phone screen. When you tap an icon of a folder, you're not interacting with the folder itself. You're interacting with a helpful symbol designed to make a hidden complexity easier to work with. Likewise, the colour blue you see in the sky may not be the sky's true nature but a translation. The mind's way of presenting information in a form you can understand. This does not make experience false, it makes it functional. Nature may be offering us the simplest, most efficient user interface for survival and meaning-making, and the richness of our inner lives, emotions, memories, sensations, emerges through this interface in ways that shape the entire texture of reality. A similar idea appears in the teachings of modern contemplative teachers like Deepak Chopra, who suggests that what we call the universe is inseparable from the observer. In his view, experience is built from sensations, perceptions, and interpretations that arise in awareness. The world as we know it is shaped moment by consciousness interacting with information. In this sense, reality becomes a dynamic story, authored jointly by the world and the mind. You can feel the truth of this in your daily life. Think about how different the world feels when you are stressed compared to when you're calm. The sky is the same sky. The room is the same room. Yet one moment the world feels overwhelming, and the next it feels spacious. The external environment hasn't changed. The inner environment has, and reality shifts with it. A walk outside feels different when you are joyful than when you are grieving. A familiar street feels new when you travel it with someone you love. A quiet morning carries different meaning depending on your state of mind. These subtle changes show how deeply intertwined mind and world truly are. Some thinkers go even further, suggesting that consciousness might be the foundation upon which all experiences rest. This is not the claim that matter is unreal, but rather that matter and mind may be two sides of the same coin. Much like a wave and the ocean are not separate, experience and the world may arise together. We tend to think of consciousness as sitting inside us, observing a world out there. But perhaps consciousness is the field in which both the inner and outer worlds appear, a space where sensations, thoughts, and perceptions unfold. Yet even this idea must be held gently. The goal is not to declare that mind creates everything or matter creates everything. These are simply different stories we tell to make sense of something mysterious. Mind-first views are compelling because they align with the immediacy of experience. You only ever meet the world through awareness. Matter-first views are compelling because they align with the structure and predictability of physical laws. Both perspectives illuminate different sides of a vast landscape. Creativity plays a special role here. Human beings are uniquely capable of breaking old mental constructs and forming new ones. A painter sees something in a blank canvas that others cannot. A poet finds meaning in a single moment. A scientist imagines patterns in chaos. These acts of creativity reveal something about the flexibility of reality as experienced through mind. The world is not only what is given through the senses, it is also shaped by imagination, expectation, and the quiet power of attention. There are moments in life that demonstrate this vividly. When you stand in a museum and look at a painting, the canvas holds pigments arranged in patterns. But the experience of the painting, the feeling it evokes, the memory it awakens, the meaning it carries, arises in the mind. Two people standing side by side can look at the same painting and see entirely different worlds. One sees nostalgia, the other sees sorrow. The painting is the same, the realities are not. Similarly, when you listen to a piece of music, the structure of the sound waves is objective, but the meaning they carry, comfort, excitement, longing, comes from within. Reality as lived is always a partnership between sensation and interpretation. Dreams offer another window into this partnership. When dreaming, you inhabit a world that feels vivid, coherent, and emotionally real, even though it arises entirely from within. During a dream, you rarely question the authenticity of the experience. Only upon waking do you recognize that the dream world was constructed. Some philosophers and consciousness researchers ask whether waking life may share more with the dream world than we often admit. Not in the sense that waking life is unreal, but in the sense that our minds actively render the world moment by moment, blending perception with interpretation. Modern virtual reality technology mirrors this idea in an unexpectedly poetic way. When you put on a VR headset, images and sounds combine to create a convincing world. Your body responds to what you experience, not what is physically present. Your heart races at a simulated height. You reach out to touch objects that aren't there. The mind reacts to experience directly, regardless of its source. And this reaction is real, even if the world producing it is constructed. This invites a gentle question. When illusions feel real, and real events are shaped by interpretation, what truly separates the constructed from the actual? Perhaps instead of dividing reality into real and unreal, we can think in terms of layers: sensory, emotional, conceptual. Mind and world are interwoven so thoroughly that trying to separate them may miss the deeper truth. Reality is a shared creation, shaped both from outside and from within. As we drift deeper into this exploration, the goal is not to decide what the universe really is, but to soften the boundaries between mind and world. When you begin to see how much the mind participates in shaping experience, the universe becomes more alive, more responsive, more personal, not because it bends to your will, but because you are a participant in its unfolding, moment by moment, breath by breath. There are evenings when you return to a familiar room, and without anything having changed, the room somehow feels different. The walls are the same colour, the furniture stands exactly where you left it, the air carries the same faint scent, and yet something in the atmosphere has shifted. Perhaps it feels warmer, more welcoming, or perhaps it feels distant, muted, as though the light has dimmed even when the lamps are as bright as ever. This quiet transformation reveals something subtle about reality. The world outside does not always shape your inner experience. Often, it is the other way around. Your inner world weaves itself into every moment, tinting the colours of your surroundings in ways no one else can see. One of the simplest examples of this is the difference between loneliness and solitude. The physical circumstances may be identical. You're alone in a room, surrounded by silence. But the emotional experience changes everything. Loneliness feels heavy, as if the walls press inward, as though the silence deepens too much. Solitude, on the other hand, feels expansive. The same silence becomes comforting. The same room becomes a sanctuary. Nothing in the external world changed. The internal world did. Psychologists sometimes describe this as the shaping effect of interpretation, but we do not need clinical language to understand it. You can feel it each time an emotion shifts. When you are anxious, even soft footsteps outside your door might startle you. When you're joyful, the same sound seems gentle. When you are grieving, sunlight can feel too bright, almost intrusive. When you are at peace, sunlight feels like a balm. These differences remind us that reality is not only the arrangement of objects around us, it is also the arrangement of feelings within us. Attention plays a quiet but powerful role in this. Where your attention rests, your reality follows. If your mind is fixed on a worry, the world narrows around it. If your attention rests on your breath, the world slows. If you focus on something beautiful, the movement of a curtain in a breeze, the softness of a pillow beneath your head, the entire tone of the moment shifts. Attention is not a spotlight that simply lights up what is already there. It is more like a lens that changes the texture of the world depending on how you direct it. For example, imagine sitting near a window while rain falls outside. If you listen to the rhythm of the raindrops, the moment may feel soothing. If you focus on an unresolved task or something you fear, the rain might blend into the background and the moment feels tense. If you let your attention rest lightly on your breathing, the rain can become part of a much larger sense of calm. The rain does not change, your attention does. This interplay between inner and outer worlds means that reality is not a single fixed experience. It is a dynamic dance between sensation and interpretation. Sensation gives you the raw material, the sound of rain, the sight of a room, the feeling of warmth on your skin. Interpretation shapes how those sensations feel: peaceful, heavy, hopeful, or overwhelming. And your story, about the moment, the quiet narrative running beneath your thoughts, shapes the interpretation itself. Consider mornings when you wake up feeling hopeful. The world seems bright, filled with possibility. A cup of tea tastes richer. A breeze through an open window feels refreshing. On other mornings, when worries curl around your thoughts, the same tea can taste bland. The same breeze can feel cold. Both mornings happened in the same house. with the same sunlight drifting across your walls, but they unfolded in different worlds shaped by your emotions. This blending of inner and outer reality becomes even clearer when you consider memories. When you revisit a childhood place, the physical space may look almost the same, but the emotional world surrounding it has changed completely. You may stand in the same corner of a room where you once felt small, uncertain or playful, yet now you feel calm, reflective or nostalgic. The room did not change. You did. The memory you bring into the moment acts like a filter, colouring everything softly. Dreams reveal the same truth from another angle. In dreams, your emotional state completely defines the world around you. A hallway might feel threatening or comforting depending on your dream mood. A face might be familiar or unknown. A simple object might carry profound meaning. The dream world is shaped moment by the mind, without any need for external cues. And when you wake, the connection between emotion and experience becomes clear. You carry this same pattern into waking life, though more subtly. Even relationships show how inner reality modifies outer reality. A friend's quiet expression might appear distant if you're worried, but thoughtful if you're calm. A partner's silence may feel hurtful one day and peaceful the next. The other person has not changed. Your internal world has adjusted the meaning of their actions. In this way, much of what you experience in relationships arises from a combination of external events and internal interpretations. This does not mean the external world is irrelevant, nor does it imply that everything is subjective. Instead, it highlights that our lived reality is woven from two threads, the outer environment and the inner landscape. Together, they create the tapestry of experience. Without one, the other is incomplete. There is a gentle comfort in recognizing this. If reality feels heavy, you do not always need to wait for the outer world to change. A small shift in attention toward breath, toward stillness, toward a comforting memory can subtly reshape the moment. Likewise, when the world feels beautiful, you can savor it more deeply by noticing how your inner state enhances it. This awareness does not eliminate difficulty, but it softens it, giving you room to breathe. When we understand that psychological worlds are also real, not illusions, not lesser versions of experience, we begin to appreciate that our emotional life is an essential part of how the universe expresses itself through us. The world is not just physical structures and sensations, it is also the quiet shades of feeling, the gentle movements of mind, the interpretations that rise and fall like tides. These inner worlds make reality richer, more textured, more human. And so, as you rest tonight, you might allow yourself to notice the small details that shape your reality in this moment. The temperature of the air, the rhythm of your breath, the softness of your pillow, the way your mind settles when you release tension from your shoulders. These subtle experiences are part of the fabric of reality, the part that belongs uniquely to you. There are nights when you slip into a dream so vivid that, for a while, you cannot tell the difference between the world your mind is creating and the world your body is resting in. You might be walking through familiar streets that feel impossibly bright, or talking with someone who has long since drifted out of your life. In the moment, everything feels completely real. Your heartbeat responds, your breath shifts, your emotions rise naturally. Only when you wake do you realize that the entire world you inhabited, the sounds, the shapes, the people, existed nowhere except within the gentle circuits of your own mind. This nightly experience offers a soft doorway into one of the most intriguing ideas in modern philosophy and technology, that reality itself might be a kind of simulation, not necessarily in the cold, metallic sense of machines running code in a vast cosmic laboratory, but in the quieter, more contemplative sense that What we call the world may be a layer of experience rendered by deeper patterns of information. The simulation hypothesis is often framed dramatically, but tonight we can sit with it gently as a metaphor for how deeply intertwined mind and world truly are. To understand this softly, imagine yourself putting on a virtual reality headset. As the screen lights up, you find yourself standing on a cliff overlooking an ocean at sunset. The waves move, the wind whistles, the light fades into amber. For a few minutes, your body responds as if it were truly standing on that cliff. Your breath slows, your shoulders rise slightly. Your mind accepts what it sees because the experience feels coherent. It feels complete. Even though you intellectually know the scene is generated by pixels and programming, your senses, the ones that define reality for you, accept it as meaningful and vivid. The question that arises is simple. If a virtual world can feel real, and if dreams can feel real, what exactly separates the real world from these crafted ones? Is it their permanence, their consistency, their physical consequences, or is it something deeper, the way consciousness engages with them? Some thinkers suggest that the physical universe may operate like a simulation, not because someone built it deliberately, but because the underlying structure of reality behaves more like a flow of information than a collection of solid objects. Space, time, matter, and energy may be patterns, expressions of deeper relationships that act like code beneath the surface. This does not diminish the beauty or significance of the world. If anything, it makes the world more astonishing, like discovering that your favourite novel is written in a language far richer than the one printed on the page. But you do not need to imagine cosmic computers to feel the relevance of this idea. You already experience multiple worlds layered upon each other. There is the waking world you navigate each day. There is the dream world that arises each night. There is the emotional world that colours your experience moment by moment. There is the conceptual world you build through language and memory. Reality in this sense is not a single structure but a collection of layers, each one shaped by the mind as much as by external conditions. Dreams especially show us how convincingly the mind can create worlds. In a dream, you do not question the logic of the impossible. You accept contradictions effortlessly. You walk through walls or speak with a loved one who lives thousands of miles away, and none of it feels strange. The dream world is constructed entirely from within, yet your body responds as though it were encountering real events. If a dream can shape your emotions, your physiology, even your memories, perhaps waking reality is not as separate from inner construction as we assume. The simulation idea becomes less unsettling when viewed through this lens. It becomes a metaphor for the way the mind renders experience. Even if the physical world is completely independent, the world you perceive is always mediated by mental processes that act like a rendering engine, converting raw information into colours, sounds, shapes, and meaning. In this sense, experience itself is a simulation, not false, but created in real time, tailored to your biology, your history, and your attention. Our growing technology mirrors this process. When you watch a film, your emotions respond to images that are not physically present. When you listen to a piece of music, your mind builds a world of feeling around it. When you look at a photograph, your memories fill in an entire atmosphere. The scent of the day, the temperature of the air, even though the image itself is only tiny patterns of light and shadow. Augmented reality too blends the digital with the physical. You might hold up your phone and see virtual creatures wandering across your living room. Your eyes know the creatures are not physically there, yet part of your mind accepts them because the illusion is convincing enough for experience to respond. Reality becomes a mixture of sensory input and mental interpretation, a hybrid world. This raises a deeper question. Is reality defined by what exists independently, or by what experience recognizes as real? If an emotion feels real, does it matter whether it was triggered by a physical event or by a memory? If a dream affects your waking mood, is the dream unreal? If a virtual landscape can calm your breath or raise your heart rate, is it less meaningful than a physical environment? Perhaps instead of dividing reality into real and unreal, we can think of it as layers of coherence. Waking life is highly coherent, stable, shared, predictable. Dreams are coherent only within themselves. Virtual worlds are coherent as long as the illusion holds. Emotional worlds are coherent through inner consistency. All of them shape your experience. All of them are real in the sense that they affect you, change you, and become part of your memory. Simulation theory, when softened, becomes less about questioning the existence of the world and more about recognizing how much the mind participates in constructing the world we experience. It reminds us that perception is an active process, not a passive one. It invites us to notice how the boundaries between inner and outer worlds blur, how imagination and memory blend with sensation, how the mind constantly generates meaning. And in recognizing this, the world becomes more alive, more fluid, more responsive. You become not just a passenger in reality, but a co-creator, someone whose attention, emotion, and awareness shape the texture of each moment. Tonight, as you rest, you might let this thought settle gently. Perhaps reality is not a single, rigid structure, but a story unfolding in layers, each shaped by the interplay between consciousness and the world. Whether that story is written in atoms, information, memories, or dreams, you are part of its telling. There is a soft moment at the start of each day when you decide, or at least believe you decide, to rise from bed. You lift the blanket, place your feet on the floor, and begin moving through the world. In that quiet unfolding, it feels natural to say, "I chose to do this." You might feel the small freedom of stretching, the simple decision of making tea first or washing your face first, the subtle sense that you are the author of these actions. Free will feels as familiar as breathing. It is part of how you understand yourself, part of how you make meaning out of your life. But when thinkers and scientists look more closely, the picture becomes more mysterious. The universe, according to many interpretations, behaves with a kind of deep consistency. The unfolding of events follows patterns, relationships, and laws that don't waver. Some describe this gently by saying that the world is shaped like a long line of dominoes. Each one falls because the one before it fell. Each moment arises because of countless conditions set in motion long before we were born. From this perspective, every choice you make, from standing up in the morning to whispering a thought to yourself at night, may be the result of prior causes cascading quietly through time. This is the essence of determinism, but we can hold it softly, not as a rigid conclusion, but as a picture. Imagine a winding path through a forest, where each part of the trail was shaped by years of wind, rain, roots, and footsteps. When you walk that path, your steps feel like your own, but the path itself was formed long before you arrived. In this view, free will may feel real because you experienced the choosing, yet the conditions that make that choice possible were already in motion. And then there is the opposite possibility, that the universe is not fully predetermined, that some moments shimmer with unpredictability. This idea does not rely on randomness as something harsh or chaotic. Instead, we can think of it as a gentle openness in the unfolding of events. Imagine a field of tall grass waving under a soft breeze. You can predict the movement of the entire field, yet each blade still sways slightly differently. Some scientists and philosophers suggest that our choices might arise from a blend of predictability and subtle unpredictability, a universe that is both structured and slightly flexible, allowing for genuine spontaneity. But even this does not fully settle the question of whether you are the one doing the choosing. If your thoughts and decisions arise from brain processes that operate beneath awareness, and those processes are shaped by genetics, childhood experiences, emotions, habits, and countless influences woven into your history, then free will becomes softer, more nuanced. It may not vanish, but it may not be absolute. It might be more like choosing the direction of your steps on a path you did not create. Some neuroscientists explore this through careful experiments, observing how parts of the brain activate just before a person becomes consciously aware of making a decision. Instead of interpreting these findings harshly, as if they disprove free will, we can interpret them gently. Consciousness may be more like the final stage of a process that begins deep in neural activity, rising into awareness like a thought rising toward the surface of a calm lake. The moment you become aware of a decision is the moment the decision has fully formed, not necessarily the moment it began. But this does not make your experience of choosing meaningless. In fact, the feeling of intention, the sense of "I want to do this," is part of the process itself. The brain integrates countless signals, patterns, memories, and interpretations into that feeling. You're not separate from these conditions. You are these conditions woven together. The choice is not something done to you. It is something arising as you. Philosophers call this view compatibilism, though we can avoid the term and instead describe it softly. Freedom may lie not in escaping the universe's structure, but in participating in it fully. Imagine a river flowing between two banks. You cannot control the entire river, but you can guide your movement within it. Steer gently toward the right, float slowly toward the left, pause in calmer waters, or drift for a while. The choices you make matter, even if the river itself flows toward the sea. In daily life, this gentle view of free will feels truer than any extreme position. You do not choose your childhood, your temperament, your heartbeat, or the basic shape of your mind. You do not choose the era you were born into, or the planet you inhabit, or the countless influences that shape your preferences. And yet, within this vast network of conditions, you still sense a space of possibility, a window through which intention, care, creativity, and kindness can enter. Perhaps the essence of free will is not absolute control, but the ability to respond. You cannot choose every thought that arises, but you can choose which thought to follow. You cannot control every emotion that enters the mind, but you can soften your relationship with it. You cannot avoid every difficulty, but you can meet it with different attitudes. These small acts of steering, these gentle adjustments, are the freedom you live inside, even if the larger river flows from ancient springs you never saw. This softer view also makes room for compassion. When someone acts out of anger, fear, or confusion, you may begin to see that their behavior comes from a long chain of conditions, just as yours does. This does not excuse harmful actions, but it provides context. Everyone is walking along paths shaped before they arrived, trying in small ways to guide their movement with the resources they have in that moment. There is also comfort in recognizing that your life is not entirely in your hands, nor entirely out of them. You're both the traveller and the path, the thinker and the thoughts, the chooser and the conditions that shape the choice. Freedom, then, is not a stark yes or no. It is a spectrum, a gentle blending of influence and intention. Tonight, as you rest, you might feel this softness in your own experience. Notice how thoughts arise without effort. Notice how intentions form like small currents in a larger sea. Notice how your breath moves without you choosing it, yet you can guide it with a gentle shift of attention. In this interplay between what happens and how you respond, you may sense a truth that is both humbling and freeing. Life is not something you control completely, but neither is it something you drift through passively. It is a dance, a quiet partnership between the universe's unfolding and your own capacity to respond with awareness. There is a gentle thought that has wandered through human minds for thousands of years, appearing in different cultures and different ages, always returning like a soft echo. Perhaps consciousness is not something limited to humans or even to living creatures, but something woven into the very fabric of existence. This idea has many names in philosophy and spiritual traditions, but tonight we can explore it without labels, slowly, quietly, as if walking through a field at dusk, noticing how the light seems to belong not just to the sky, but to everything it touches. To understand this possibility, imagine for a moment that awareness is not a spotlight shining from within your mind, but a faint glow that threads through the world itself. In this view, consciousness is not something the brain produces the way a candle produces light. Instead, it is something the brain channels, focuses, or expresses, like a prism revealing the colours already hidden within a beam of sunlight. The idea is not that rocks and rivers think or dream, but that the basic ingredients of experience, the capacity to feel like something, may be more fundamental than matter as we normally imagine it. This view appears in many ancient traditions. In some forms of Buddhism, the world is understood as a continuous field of interdependent experience, where mind and matter arise together like waves on the same sea. In certain indigenous cultures, mountains, rivers, and forests are described as having their own kind of presence, not human-like, but alive in a way that reflects connection rather than isolation. Even in Western philosophy, some thinkers quietly suggested that consciousness might be a universal property, not something that springs into existence only when nervous systems become complex enough. Modern thought has its own version of this idea, one that emerges not from myth or meditation, but from the study of complex systems. Some researchers propose that consciousness may arise when information becomes deeply intertwined, when patterns connect in rich and dynamic ways. This concept, known as a measure of integrated information, can sound technical when phrased in symbols, but we can imagine it instead as a tapestry. A simple cloth with a few threads carries little detail, but a tapestry woven with many interconnected strands begins to hold images, meaning, and depth. In this metaphor, consciousness is the glow of complexity, the brightness that appears when many parts work together as one. If this is true, then consciousness may not be a switch that turns on only when a brain reaches a certain size. It might be more like a spectrum of vividness. In small systems, like a tiny organism or a cluster of particles, the glow might be incredibly faint, like a candle far across a valley. In larger, more interconnected systems, such as a human mind, the glow becomes more pronounced, like lanterns lighting a winding path. The idea is gentle and speculative, but it suggests that the universe might hold varying shades of inner experience, not as owners of thoughts or personalities, but as sparks of presence woven into the structure of things. This does not mean that a stone has opinions or that a molecule has desires. Instead, it proposes that the universe may possess an interior dimension, a quiet innerness, just as much as it possesses an exterior dimension of atoms, forces, and fields. You can think of it like music. A single note played softly on a distant instrument might barely register, yet it is still music in its simplest form. A symphony, by contrast, fills the space with rich, layered sound. Both are expressions of the same underlying principles. In a similar way, consciousness might exist in simple or complex forms throughout the universe, depending on the richness of the relationships within a system. Interestingly, this perspective mirrors the relational view of physics, where nothing exists in isolation. Properties arise from interactions. Identity is shaped by relationship. The universe behaves less like a collection of objects and more like a web of connections. In this web, perhaps consciousness is not an isolated product, but a natural expression of connection, a way the universe listens to itself from within. Whether or not this is true, the idea encourages a softer approach to the world. If consciousness is widespread, even faintly, then existence itself becomes more intimate, more compassionate. The world is no longer a machine of cold parts, but a living process, changing, resonating, responding. You might begin to see a tree not just as an object, but as a participant in a larger harmony. You might sense the presence of a mountain not as lifeless rock, but as a vast expression of time and pressure, holding its own kind of stillness. Even the quiet hum of the night could feel less like emptiness and more like a subtle conversation between countless forms of being. Regardless of the specific scientific details, this view aligns with something we already feel in our bones. The world is not simply out there, separate and indifferent. It meets us in ways that are intimate, responsive, and sometimes astonishingly personal. We feel the tenderness of certain landscapes. We sense peace in quiet forests, awe in star-filled skies, comfort in gentle rain. These responses come from within us, but they hint at a relationship, as though consciousness recognizes itself reflected in the wider world. Some thinkers take this idea further, suggesting that consciousness might be the fundamental element from which everything else emerges. In this view, matter is a pattern of consciousness, not the other way around. Experience is not an accident of evolution, but the basic fabric of existence. This idea is bold, speculative, and not universally accepted, but it resonates with contemplative traditions that have long described reality as arising within awareness, rather than awareness arising within reality. Yet we must hold all these possibilities softly. The true nature of consciousness remains a profound mystery. No one can say with certainty where it begins or where it ends. No one knows how awareness arises or whether it is a property of matter, force woven into the cosmos, or something entirely beyond our current understanding. The humility this mystery inspires is one of the most beautiful aspects of exploring it. Tonight, as you rest, you might take a moment to feel the quiet presence behind your thoughts, the awareness that listens, watches, and receives the world without forcing anything. That presence is your own small lantern of consciousness, glowing softly in the dark. Whether it is a solitary flame or one light among many that shine throughout the universe is a question we may never fully answer. But sensing the possibility invites a deeper appreciation of what it means to be alive, to be aware, in a universe that may itself be listening. There is a certain hush that settles over the world late at night, a softness in the air, a gentle dimming of boundaries, when even your thoughts seem to walk more quietly. It is in this stillness that a question like, "What is reality?" feels less like a problem to solve, and more like a lantern to hold, lighting the space around you with a warm, steady glow. We've walked through many ideas together, perceptions shaped by the brain, the layered nature of existence, the strange shimmer of quantum possibility, the spacious insights of Buddhism, the delicate fluidity of the self, the intimate partnership between mind and world, and the open questions surrounding free will and consciousness. Now, this final step of our journey, we can let these ideas drift together, settling into a single, gentle understanding. If you imagine reality as a vast landscape, you can picture different explorers travelling across it from different directions. Scientists approach from one path, measuring patterns, discovering structures, tracing relationships between forces and matter. They reveal the quiet mathematics that underpins the world, not numbers floating in space, but a harmony of interactions like threads weaving the fabric of existence. Their view is precise, disciplined, and beautifully grounded in observation. Philosophers approach from another path, asking questions that stretch beyond measurement. What does it mean to exist? What is the nature of experience? How do we know what we know? Their view is reflective, probing, and open to possibility. It gently exposes the assumptions behind our understanding of the world, reminding us that certainty is often an illusion we cling to for comfort. Contemplative traditions approach from yet another direction, not through theory or instruments, but through the direct observation of experience. They notice how thoughts arise without invitation, how emotions swell and fade like tides, how the boundary between observer and observed softens when one pays close attention. Their view emphasizes awareness itself as the foundation, the quiet space in which all phenomena unfold. What becomes clear is that each perspective touches a different part of the same great mystery. None of them are complete on their own, just as touching a single branch does not reveal the entire tree. But when taken together, a more spacious picture begins to form. Reality may not be a single brick of solid truth. It may be something softer, layered, relational, and alive. On one level, reality is physical. Atoms arranged in patterns, energy flowing through space, time woven into a vast structure. This is the world described by physics, clear, orderly, surprisingly elegant. On another level, reality is personal, sensations blooming into meaning, emotions shifting the tone of each moment, memories colouring the present. This is the world shaped by mind, intimate, textured, deeply human. On yet another level, reality is relational. Nothing exists independently. Everything arises through connection, each moment leaning gently on countless conditions that came before. This is the world described by contemplative traditions, interwoven, impermanent, radiant with mutual dependence. Across these levels, a theme begins to emerge. Reality is not one thing, but a dance between many forces, between matter and meaning, between perception and world, between the inner landscape and the outer environment, between the universe unfolding and consciousness witnessing it. The boundaries between these are not as sharp as we once believed. They blend together like colours dissolving into one another at the edges of a watercolour painting. Quantum physics adds yet another layer to this picture, reminding us that possibilities may precede actual events, that particles may not settle into definite forms until conditions invite them to, and that the act of observation itself plays a mysterious role. This does not mean the universe depends on us personally. It simply means the universe and awareness participate together in ways we don't yet fully understand, like two dancers responding to each other's movements without knowing who began the dance. The idea of simulation, when held gently, invites us to consider that reality might be structured like a story unfolding within a larger story, not necessarily artificial, not controlled by some external intelligence, but layered, like dreams within sleep or images appearing on the surface of water. Whether or not the universe is literally a simulation matters less than the deeper invitation. The world you experience is shaped through mind, perception, interpretation, and awareness. Reality is not just given, it is participated in. And then there is the mystery of consciousness, the quiet glow at the centre of every experience, the single undeniable fact that holds everything else. Whether consciousness arises from the brain, or whether the brain is simply one way consciousness expresses itself, remains one of the most profound open questions in science. Some believe consciousness is a spark that appears when matter becomes complex. Others believe consciousness is the foundation from which matter emerges. Still others believe consciousness is woven into the universe itself, flickering softly at the smallest scales and shining brightly in beings capable of reflection and choice. Whatever the truth is, we stand before a vast horizon we have not yet crossed. So what is reality? In the gentle light of everything we've explored, reality seems less like a single answer and more like a meeting place, a space where the physical world, the psychological world, and the contemplative world all touch, a space where perception shapes experience, a space where awareness quietly illuminates everything it encounters, a space where meaning rises from interaction, not isolation. Reality may be a dance, not a dance performed for us, but a dance we are part of. Matter provides the rhythm, mind provides the movement, meaning provides the music, and consciousness, the silent listener behind it all, receives the entire performance with steady, open presence. As we arrive at the end of this long, slow exploration, there is no need to force a conclusion. Reality does not demand certainty from us. It allows us to rest inside its mystery, the way we might float on still water beneath a quiet sky. You might not know exactly what the universe is, but you can feel its presence. You can sense its patterns, its rhythms, its intimacy, and you can sense yourself within it, not separate, not isolated, but part of a vast unfolding. Perhaps the truest understanding is simply this: reality is happening, and you are here to witness it, to feel it, to breathe with it, to be gently held by it, even now as the night deepens and your thoughts grow soft.